Hey there, Dane.
Hey Patrick, how you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good, good, good.
Let me
Well, I'm
get my
glad we
camera
could
going.
reconnect here today. Hey, all right. Got the green screen. I like it.
That's right. Yep. Just
Ah,
didn't have my camera in place. Now I do.
nice, awesome. Well, I'm excited to get to reconvene with you here at the end of the video. I'll give you an update on what's going on with the event coming up here that I've been working on. So
Oh,
see
great. Okay.
if we can get you to town. I'm definitely pushing hard to get all the sponsors put together. So I've got the
Been
recording.
a it's been a wacky week in the world of mortgage, hasn't it?
Wacky week indeed. My wife, I always got to laugh because we'll be married 25 years this June 12th. I always say I had to move from Oklahoma to California to marry a girl from New Jersey, and it was one of the biggest blessings of my life. And so I was watching your TED Talk video, which is pretty awesome. I didn't realize you got to do some work for the city of Los Angeles. That's pretty cool.
Yes, that was a fun engagement and an eye-opening experience. I was there at boy, a moment in time that was tough. I was actually working for the city during the LA riots
Oh, wow.
and have some very vivid memories of what was going on. Some great stories.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, the city was it's a great city. There's a lot going on there. I enjoyed the experience thoroughly, but definitely wasn't. It didn't convince me that public administration is always well administered. There is a lot of bureaucracy that I learned about in that job.
Amen to that, brother. Well, when I
Yeah.
think of Los Angeles, I think the first Rotary Club I visited in the LA County area was in Redondo Beach, and I was really happy to call, say, hey, this is Dane with Rotary Club in Oklahoma, wanting to come visit your Rotary, and left a voicemail. And Walter, who was the president out there, called me and said, we look forward to having you come be our guest. We meet on Wednesdays at noon at the Redondo Beach Yacht Club. We'll buy you lunch. Come on out. You'll hear my swan song, because he had been president that year and he was going to show all the slides. And it just blew me away, the amount of wonderful things they did to help the community. I mean, the slides were just prolific. And I said, man, we gotta up our game back here in Oklahoma based on what y'all are doing. But one thing that was
Yeah.
interesting is, uh, I encouraged my sister-in-law Jennifer and brother-in-law Alex to come, but they were busy, and of course they didn't know about Rotary. And I'd already drank the Kool-Aid. I love Rotary. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I got to sit next to Vera Jimenez, who still to this day does the weather on KTLA there, and
Huh.
the neatest lady. And she was just so super down to earth. And doesn't matter where I go to visit Rotarians around the world, they're just some of the salt of the earth people just like you. So I'm just so grateful and thankful we got connected and got to talk about your book, The Connector's Way. But today we're talking about, and I got this little crude deal to show you. The book
All
we're talking
right.
about today is The Trust Away. Do you have a copy to show everybody?
I do. I actually have one here. What good author would not have a copy of his book right next to him, right?
Yeah, there you go. And I was looking up it on Amazon, where I was looking on the front and the back, kind of getting ready to ask some questions. So kick it off here. And then I'm going to go off script because I'd like to learn a little bit more about your backstory and kind of what it was like doing a TED Talk. That's one of my goals. Now, you'll laugh at me because I was told by a doctor, an eye doctor, I have better than 20/20 vision. Um, and I said, well, how is that? My glasses are thicker than the bottom of a Coke bottle. And he said, well, take the glasses off and read this tiny little letters. He said, if your eyes were, if you're a jeweler, you wouldn't need a loop. And I still laugh at that. So, okay, so
Huh.
my kids laugh when I do this. But on the back of your book, of Trusted Way, it was a great little quote here. The trusted way brings fresh insights into timeless truths. In this business parable, you'll learn the power of the four-way test and much more, by Mark Sanborn, past president of National Speakers Association and the author of The Fred Factor. And then the next one, love Dr. Ivan Meisner, BNI. He said, to be successful, you need a network of connections that is both wide and deep. In this well-written parable, author Patrick Galvin shows us that trust is the foundation on which a referral-based business is built. So I'm excited to kind of jump off from there. And before we do, who was it that inspired you to start writing? I was curious. I want to give credit to whoever that was.
Well, I've always been a storyteller,
Yeah.
and I've always been a reader, and I can't say it's been a particular person. I've just enjoyed stories, and I struggled with writing when I was trying to write a business book that was a uh, nonfiction book about relationship building, which was my first one, The Connector's Way. And as soon as I switched over to the story format, it just flowed.
Okay.
And fortunately, as human beings, we're wired to connect with story.
Right.
And that's my strength, is sharing stories. And you can embed a lot of content, a lot of ideas, a lot of best practices through story. So
Yeah.
for me, it was getting over thinking I had to be the expert writing this nonfiction book about business to realize, hey, you could tell a lot through story. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
I love that. Well, and I love that. So what's a story you could share that maybe is or isn't in the book when you're down there in Los Angeles? Because I did listen to your TED Talk, but just for those that maybe haven't heard your TED Talk, which I would encourage them to do that. But what's a story of somebody you remember hanging out with that had an impact on you in some way or fashion in LA County when you're down there?
Well, in my TED Talk, I shared a story about a woman named Thelma. And I have vivid memories of her. I talked about her in the TED Talk. She was in her 70s. I was a young college graduate. They assigned me to the Department of Aging, or Department of Senior Citizens. And I thought, oh man, I didn't get a sexy department like, water and power or something like that, that controls the big dollars and where all the politicos are spending their time. I'm in with all these old people. And honestly, that was terrible bias on my part.
Yeah.
Because I think we forget how much we have to learn from our elders.
Yes.
And the department was staffed up with a lot of people who were in their 70s and even into their 80s. And some of them were the most vibrant people I knew. Thelma was one of them. She came in every day in her silver slippers, ready to light the world on fire. She was just so fired up with being able to help her fellow senior. And her enthusiasm was just so overflowing that all of a sudden I started to get much more of a sense of mission about working with the senior community in the city of Los Angeles. And I learned something, that age does not have anything to do with vivacity and how much you love life and zest. And Thelma could have been probably 75, 76. But she was much younger than some 20-year-olds I know to this day. I mean, who are just kind of tired and worn down, that don't take your age as a reflection of your energy level or what you're going to do. It's internal, and it's not chronological, it's psychological. And that was a huge takeaway that she gave me.
I love that. No, and it's so true. I was just talking to my mom, she'll turn 77 this year in 2022 in July. And, and then my in-laws live down there in a golf course 55 and up community in the south part of it's Sun Lakes community down there in Chandler. And I tell you what, we went to their Monday bingo night, and it was like a rock and roll bingo, and they're having more fun and just more life and more vibrance and energy and laughing, and just really, it's so true. It's kind of between our ears. It's kind of a decision, right? Okay,
Yeah, we're going to age. We're going to lose certain faculties. Our eyesight won't be as good. Our hearing won't be as good. But our mind is something that we have agency over. And if we think we're old, gosh darn it, we're going to be old. But if we are embracing life and the challenges that it has as potential opportunities, if we look at it in a different way, it can be a very rich experience to bring all of that lived history with you when you're looking at the world and making decisions that you just don't have as a younger person. So yeah, that was a huge takeaway from that job.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and kind of to piggyback what you're saying, there's a few folks in Rotary Club that are of the older age bracket, and man, they're some of my favorite mentors, and they just teach me how to that zest for life and just laugh more than you cry and have fun with it and just kind of lean into it, right? So I love that.
Yeah. I mean, some of the psychologically most energetic people I know are Rotarians who are in their 70s and 80s. It's amazing. So I think as an institution, Rotary, we need to embrace youth, and we need to have programs that attract in younger people. But at the same time, we need to value the experience that senior members have, because so many of them have more time in their lives to mentor younger Rotarians. They have more time to be involved in community projects. And we don't want to turn a blind eye to this great treasure that we have within our organization. The same is true for any service club, Kiwanis, Elks, Lions, Masons, you name it. I mean, we want to be younger, but we can't do it at the cost of not realizing the wealth that we have in our senior members.
Well, in the spirit of your book, The Trust Way, The Connector's Way, I think that's a great segue into the book, because obviously, by learning how to work with people of all ages and be well-rounded and open-minded to that and willing to receive the lessons and the wisdom that they can impart on us, if we're willing to, remember, we got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And listen more and learn more. And
yeah, use them accordingly, as my mom said, right?
There you go, right? So what was it specifically that made you say, "I'm going to write the book, The Trusted Way"? Kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the trusted way came after my first business parable. And the first business parable came out and I wasn't sure how well it was going to do. I just posted on LinkedIn yesterday, we got our 5th printing, 40,000 copies sold. We think it's only just starting. It's been translated into China,
Wow.
into Chinese. And it's gotten me out into the world talking about relationship building. And the funny thing about these conversations I've been having over the last 6 years is some people say, man, this book is great. It got me to refocus on things I used to do that I got away from, or I adopted some new principles. But my business, when I thought about it as a relationship building enterprise, as opposed to a transactional enterprise, has gotten a lot more successful. I'm a lot happier.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But I've also heard from people who said, I tried some of the relationship building ideas that were in the Connector's Way, and I don't know if I didn't do them right. They didn't work for me, but I was a little frustrated. And that kind of surprised me a little bit. And I thought about it. And then I started asking them questions and reflecting on the people I was talking to. And I came down to this understanding that the difference between those who were having success with relationship building, whether it were ideas I shared or ones that they were learning in other places, these people had a foundation of trust. Mm-hmm. So when they do relationship building, whether it's sending out thank you cards, whether it's referring business onto people, it's perceived as being authentic because they have trust with that individual and that person is not questioning their motives. Now, if you try relationship building as a tactical activity, and you don't have a foundation of trust, oftentimes you will be perceived as a manipulator. You're trying to get people to do something, whether it's to buy from you, to refer to you, to just do something in your interest, not in the interest of the other person. And sadly, trust is not something that many of us learn. It's not a course that we take in school. If we're lucky, we've had parents or mentors who've shown us kind of how to have a trusted life. But sadly, a lot of people haven't had that mentorship, haven't had that family situation. And it's not talked about enough. So I realized that the great follow-on book to The Connector's Way would be The Trusted Way, because without trust, relationship building is not going to be very effective. So it just was absolutely the necessary book for me to write after that first one, having heard the stories from people that were struggling with relationship building.
Well, that makes sense. And I was reading some of the reviews in your book on Amazon.com. You got a lot of 5-star reviews. So obviously people love it. And it's one of the ones that popped out to me was, it says it's a go-to book on how to build sustainable business relationships. And then another one that popped out to me was, it's important lessons that motivate and inspire. In the addition to the 4-way test, the Trusted Way brings to life a wealth of principles and life values that are essential to a successful business. Patrick has a guilt-free way of sharing important lessons that motivate and inspire. And the thing I think about in that regard, when you're talking about trust, I think we all kind of have that sense that we kind of put our little feelers out, like the old meet the parents human lie detector test.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your motives? What's the intentions here? Is it all about you, or is this going to be you're wanting to help me reach my goals? How would you respond to that?
It's great if you have that ability to put on the test. I mean, I think that one of the pushbacks I get is, well, in my book, I'm talking about the 4-way test, which, Dane, I know you know as a Rotarian, it's kind of near and dear to both of us. It's not known outside of Rotary, and we can talk about what it is in just a bit here.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people say, well, your vision of truth and trust may be different from mine, so it's very relative, don't judge. Well, here's the thing. If you're not operating by some standard, whether it's the 4-way test, whether it's the platinum rule, the golden rule, unless you have some standard, what holds you to account? So, what you just described, I get a clear sense that you have a standard. The sad thing is a lot of people don't. And I think that you need to develop a standard. I'm advocating for the 4-way test. If someone reads it and says, it should be a 5-way test, I want to add a principle. Great, add it. But you need a standard. Yeah. You need a standard, because if you're not measuring and you don't hold something, you don't have a way of holding yourself to account, you're liable to just start making decisions in your own self-interest, not in the greater good. And I think that we need to start thinking as a society about beyond ourselves. Yeah. We need to think about the greater good, the good of our community, the good of our state, the good of the world, the good of our country, the good of the world. And without talking about this, without having a standard, we're stuck. And we're liable to make some decisions that are not good ones.
Well, and what's interesting is once we go down into this rabbit hole of running our life and of the things we think, say, or do through the four-way test, it's interesting how you touch on in your TED talk the residual effects of how it's our overall well-being, our health, our energy, our just feeling better as we move through our day. It has real health ramifications by carrying yourself through your life, moving through your day, and running through using that standard of the four-way test as a filter, of the things we think, say, or do. So why don't you share with folks that are watching the four-way test? Go ahead.
Okay. So the four-way test, let me kind of roll back, because I think the best way to understand it is to understand where it came from.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the four-way test did not start out as a Rotary thing. It was actually conceived of by a business person.
Okay.
Back in 1932, a young executive, Herbert Taylor, stepped into a job as president of a company that was on the brink. And actually the creditors for the bank that held the largest loans that this company had were scared that they weren't going to be paid back if the company went under. So they brought in this hotshot young executive, and he knew it was bad, but when he actually assumed the presidency, it was worse than he expected. He actually had to extend a personal loan to the company to keep it afloat, to make payroll. And he knew it wasn't tenable for the long haul. So he was stuck with, how do I turn this thing around? Now, he couldn't compete on price because his company was cookware. They had pots, pans, utensils, that sort of thing. They had cut prices to the bone. 1932, when he stepped in, the third year of the Great Depression. So, they had cut their prices. They couldn't increase product offering or introduce new products because they were undercapitalized. So he saw that the only way he could save his company would be to define a reputation in the industry as being the most ethical cookware company. A lot of companies were making shoddy product, cutting corners, freezing out their distributors. And he knew that if he had the ability to make his company the most ethical, more people would want to do business with him. But how could he do that? So he looked at different codes of conduct, different ethical standards. It all sounded very academic. It still sounds very academic when you dive into the literature about trust and ethics. It's very philosophical, going back to the ancient Greeks, but it's not practical. And he knew he needed something practical. So one day he's in his office, head in his hands, he's praying to come up with something. And he pulls out an index card and he writes down 24 words. And those 24 words that he called the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do remain unchanged to this day. And what he wrote down, there's 4 parts to this. The first part is it the truth? That's the first part of the things that we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? The second part is it fair to all concerned? And the third thing he wrote down was, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And the fourth is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? 24 words, very simple. In fact, a lot of people say that's too simplistic. Well, that's the beauty, because he lived by that standard himself for a couple of months, rolled it out in his company after getting the approval of his division folks. People said, yeah, this is not something that I could at all disagree with. Everyone in the company started to make their decisions around these 4 principles. Long story short, in 5 years, he turned his company around. They were profitable. 10 years later, it's the most profitable company in his niche, largely because it's perceived as being the most ethical and leads to great business success. He becomes the president of Rotary International, the largest service organization in the world. He deeds the 4-way test to Rotary, and then it starts expanding out into the world. If you go to the Walgreens website, Walgreens, a company with 200,000 employees, the 4-way test is the core ethical statement that they have. And they are not alone. There are other companies that have adopted it. So it's very well known in certain circles, but because it was conceived of in 1932, there are younger Rotarians who say, that's like ancient history, not so useful. Outside of Rotary, sadly, it's not very well known. So in my book, I wanted to take what I think is a great standard and share it in a contemporary story so people could see, hey, you know what? This is as applicable today in 2022 as it was 90 years ago in 1932. And it creates, exactly going back to what we were talking about, a standard. And with a standard, you can run a much better company and you can live a better life, an easier life, because you don't have to worry about making decisions because you have something to measure them against. It's a wonderful measuring stick.
I love it. No, I've noticed that, we've talked a little bit about Rotary Club and BNI, and I'm a big fan of both of them. Now, and so both of these clubs, right?
Yes, I was very active in BNI at one time. And Ivan Meisner, who wrote that testimonial you shared, he's a terrific guy, and it's a tremendous organization.
Yeah, he's awesome. And just for those listening, since you know both organizations and we're talking about your book, I think that Rotary Club's a little different than BNI. Would you kind of give your perspective on that?
Oh, yeah, totally different. I think people can confuse them and do so at their own peril. So BNI, Dr. Ivan Meisner, business professor in Southern California, he realized that there was not really a very great network of business professionals who would get to know, like, and trust each other and refer business to one another. So he developed a standard and an organization to do this. It's spread worldwide. Very impressive organization. It is really a business leads group. There is fellowship. You meet people, you get to know them. You're not selling to the people in your club, which might have anywhere from like 10 to 35 members, but they get to know you and then they become comfortable referring you. But it really is about the business referral. Now, that's a wonderful thing. If you join Rotary looking for immediate business referrals, caution there, because Rotary was started for fellowship. And over time, it became a service club. Now, one of the wonderful things about Rotary is it is excellent for business. But if your intention is to join Rotary to get business leads and do what you did that made you successful in BNI, you're going to probably flame out pretty fast, because members in Rotary clubs are not comfortable around people who are looking for immediate business. If they don't know, like, and trust you, if you haven't been going on a regular basis, if you haven't been active in the service projects, if you haven't built real fellowship with people, it's not going to work. But I think any business person who's smart should have the short game, which is, you need to get those leads. BNI is great for that. And then Rotary I see as being the long game. And it's so exceeds business. I mean, it's going to be great from just a personal standpoint. Some of my best friends are Rotarians. I'm sure you've got some wonderful friends who are Rotarians, and I'm sure business has come about, but that's not the end game. And I think people confuse it a little bit too often. And that's sad, because I think you just have to realize every organization has its purpose.
I love the way you put that, because that's eloquently stated. BNI is the short game, because they do have the structure, the accountability, and it's designed for a specific purpose to get leads quickly, to help each other cross.
Oh, and they track them on a weekly basis. I mean, they're very methodical about it.
Right. There's structure and accountability and tracking. And that's one of the reasons I think it works. And, you can only miss so many times if you're filling that one seat per profession in each club. So I've seen it work. I've been a part of BNI. I've started several BNI chapters. But again, it is the short game, right? Whereas the long game is, again, in Rotary clubs. So they work hand in hand very well, but they're both very different by nature.
Yes.
And like you said, it's if you come into Rotary Club with the idea of, okay, I'm going to join with the explicit, expecting leads immediately, ain't going to happen. Okay.
The reverse could happen. You could absolutely burn out your name.
Yeah. It's like, what's this kid up to here?
Yeah.
We try to say, hey, this is who we are and who we're not, who we're for, and so it's a giving, service, right? And then you can give and take, or givers gain, as we talk about in the BNI world, right? Which is in both. But I like how you put that short game, long game. I think that helps most people, or at least that helps me to translate it that way.
Yep.
So for those that are looking at, okay, which book should I read first? Trusted Way or Connector's Way? What do you say to that?
If you have a great grasp of trust, maybe you're a Rotarian and you live by the 4-way test, The Trusted Way, you're going to like it. It's going to be a great book for you to reinforce that you've made a great decision by having that ethical standard. You can read it, pass it along, but you don't necessarily have to read it before you read The Connector's Way. But if you're newer to business and you really want to develop a long-term successful career, even though there are similar some characters from The Connector's Way live to see another day in The Trusted Way, and it happens in time after The Connector's Way, well, that's because I wrote the book first. But I would flip it around for a younger professional. And I would say, hey, read The Trusted Way first. Really wrestle with this idea about trust, because you need to have that down rock solid before you go out there and do relationship building as an activity. Because without that trust, the relationship building is going to fall flat.
And so I love that you said that, and that I didn't have to lead you down that path, because that's where my head was already at in my heart.
Yeah.
If we help enough people get what they want by, being a servant leader, and then I think the trust part comes together pretty quickly. That's what I found anyway. There's a young realtor that we were going to a training, and I saw a Remax office. I'd never been in there, so as I was driving to the training at the title company a week ago, it was on a Thursday. Today's Saturday, so was that 8 days ago, 9 days ago. But I just popped in there, and there was a realtor by the front desk of the reception. I said, "Hey, anybody here want to go? There's a lunch and free continuing education credits at the title company we're going to down here. First title, come on down, and it's going to be a great event." And he said, "Oh, they just did a great training here last week on probate." I said, "That's awesome. Well, if you can come, great. If not, I got to go because it's in 30 minutes." And I just headed out the door. Well, he wasn't able to make it because he had another appointment, but I followed up the next week, and turned out, said, "Hey, have you ever been to Rotary Club?" And he said, "Well, actually, my grandfather was president of the Okmulgee, Oklahoma Rotary Club when I was a grandkid, and I'd go with my granddad, Robert Laub, to Okmulgee, and his name was Robert, a great guy." And I said, "Well, come visit our Bixby, Oklahoma Rotary. I mean, it'd be great to have you visit, and you kind of tell your story about the fond memories with your grandfather going to Rotary." And this was all happening in about a week. So just to kind of share this story of, I think it embodies the trusted way and the connectors way, but starting with the trusted way, since we're focused on that on this video. So he came to Rotary. I had him tell his story about how he learned about Rotary and his grandfather, and everybody loved that. And then we had a great guest speaker come in that day, and he loved that. And then he texted me immediately after. And then we followed up, and I said, "Well, what are some of your goals? What can I do to help you with your goals?" And he said, "Well, I did about 4 million in volume last 12 months last year, and I want to get that to 10 million in volume, helping families, primarily first-time home buyers and listings." But awesome. Okay, well, let me see what I can do to start helping you. Maybe we can do another meeting one-on-one. And then turned out that day I had a client that I'd talked to. And I'm always talking to people the old 3-foot rule when you're out and about. What do you do?
Right.
Here's what I do. If we can help you, here's my text real quick. And well, that client came, got a pre-approval, and boom, I just sent it to him, and he said, "This is awesome. Thank you so much." And I could see the trust building quickly, right? It wasn't about me. It's how can I help and serve that person, help him reach his goals. That
Yes.
he said he might want to join Rotary. He's thinking about it, and so we'll see how that plays out. But to me, it's kind of the embodiment of your book, The Trust Away, for those that are willing to try Rotary Club. Not every club has a community membership, although we do. And that's one of my ways to, hey, look, if you're kind of limited, a lot of the young adults, what they're can't break free for a long lunch all the time, but they want to be a part of Rotary Club. So, hey, this is a great way to start learning some of these principles of people that live out the 4-way test and live out what you're talking about in your book. What are your thoughts on all that?
Absolutely. So you can read the 4-way test, and I can recite it, and you can nod your head saying, "Yeah, that's interesting." But anything has resonance and value when you hear stories. So in The Trusted Way, which is a parable, it's a story. There's a very challenged young entrepreneur. He's in his 20s, and his goal in life is to make as much money as he can in the shortest amount of time. And if he steps on some toes along the way, so be it.
Yeah.
By the middle of the book, he's in a bad spot. And through a series of fortuitous events, he meets some great relationship builders, and most of whom happen to be Rotarians. And they don't say, "Hey, son, read the 4-way test." They take him around, they show him in how they live their lives, both personally and professionally, how it's impacted their businesses. And it's only through seeing that lived experience that he realizes these are not just words on paper, but these are values that have resonance and can be applied in a modern business context. So I'm right with you. I mean, I think Rotary, the power of it is not, the document itself. You can go to Wikipedia and find the 4-way test. The power is knowing people who hold themselves to that standard. And you cannot help but be inspired when you see people living their lives according to the 4-way test.
Well, that modeling, like you're talking about, people that are the embodiment of, maybe they didn't know the 4-way test, but they represent that. I think of my grandfather, my mom's dad, Al Salyer, then my dad's dad, Warner Basham, and I was very blessed to hang out with them a lot as a kid on the weekends and the summertime, and just hang out and go around with them, and just watching how they would interact with people in business or at church or just in casual relationships. I refer back to a lot of that. I learned this example I learned from my grandfather, my papa, and you probably, like, if you could go back in time, and talk to somebody that maybe was one of those people in your life that maybe is no longer here, who's maybe one person that you are grateful for that helped you learn that at an early age, Patrick?
Yeah. So actually, in the book, I used grandfather because that's oftentimes a common experience that I hear from Rotarians. That that's why they got involved with Rotary. So your story, Dane, my story. We have people, we have mentors. When I think about the person who's had the biggest impact on me, it was my dad. When I graduated from business school, I went to work for a couple different companies, and then I joined my family's business, and I was the only brother who did that. And I could see that the values that they instilled in me as a kid growing up were the same values that he was instilling in his workforce. That you can't divorce who you are as a person with your family, with your friends, to who you are as a leader and a boss. And I think a lot of people try to make that division. So I saw that living by the four-way test, it's not just living by it in your business, but it's living by it in your life. So he was a huge inspiration. Sadly, a lot of people don't have these inspirational figures. They grow up, with single parents now. Half of all kids in America are growing up with a single parent. I had a week of being a single parent when my wife went away on a vacation, and I was falling apart by the end of the week. And I'm just thinking to myself, how the heck do they do it? Yeah. It's like, it is rough. So I am not casting stones at single parents. Right. But how much time do you have to instill values if you're just working to keep the family afloat? Mm-hmm. And I think that so many people don't have those inspiring figures just because in modern society, a lot of people just, they're very atomized, and families are small, and people are doing the best that they can. So as an adult, if you can join a group, whether it's Rotary, whether it's another service organization, there's other great service organizations out there, places that you are, being with people who have values where you're learning, whether it's in your church or your synagogue or whatever faith institution you go to. We need, as human beings, to find these places where people can instill values in us, because without those, our decision-making is suspect, and it's going to just be a much more challenging life for ourselves. And we're not going to be enriching the world in ways that we certainly can and should in the very short amount of time that we have on this planet.
Well, I love the writings that the books you've written up to this point. It's a nudge where, okay, we've seen it in the book. Now let's go and apply it in life. And that's what I love about your storytelling, is these are real life examples, or maybe fictional characters, but
they're composite characters in most cases. So
composite characters.
Yeah, I take little bits of people and I mash them together. And then my books are short. So both The Connector's Way and Trusted Way are designed to be read in about 90 minutes by most people, because attention spans are short. Sure. So, you have to speed up the process a little bit in a shorter book, but there are people who've read my book saying, hey, you didn't tell me you were going to be writing about me. And I said, well, I did change names, although in some cases not enough, where people saw, wait, you used my first name and gave me a new last name, but I know it's me. And you know what, they're right. So I'm really not that creative. It's like, if I'm thinking about someone's story, usually it's so tied to that person. Sometimes I have a hard time changing their first name. I'll keep the first name and just change the last name.
That's a high honor. They're in the book. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the people who I kept the first names are only the positive characters. Not everyone is 100% positive. In that case, I really dug deep and renamed them entirely. I didn't want to jeopardize any connection I had in the past. But if it was a positive thing, it's like sometimes I honored them by keeping their first name.
So you ran it through the four-way test.
Exactly. Yeah, as I was writing it, I was thinking about it when I was coming up with character names.
Well, it's just so fun to get to learn. Now, I was curious, when you were growing up, what were some of the things that you remember doing during the holidays with your family? If you could think back on that, share a little bit about yourself.
My dad worked really hard, and I think I wish we had more like long time holidays. So I'm making efforts to make time for. And when he was with us, he was really with us. But he worked so hard that when we had a vacation, he'd kind of get under the weather. Sure. And I think as he got older, he realized that he needed to get out of work more. And I think he became a more holistic person. So I learned a lesson there. And my mom really was great at just allowing us to have fun with the holidays. Mm-hmm. So she was a creative writing teacher. So definitely her fingerprints are all over what I've been doing professionally. And she would encourage me to write stories. We had a family newspaper, that would cover the holidays. So we get assignments from our mom. She was the editor-in-chief, and we'd write about different aspects of the holiday. Like the youngest sibling had to do the recipe, and I'd want to go out to a restaurant during the holidays, so I'd write a restaurant review. It was a very cool thing and very unusual. Cool. I kind of thought, well, all families have a newspaper, but seemingly that is not the case. The Galvin Gazette was in publication for about 5 years, and we covered the holidays and everything in between and send it out to family members. This is pre-internet, so we'd mimeograph them and like send them out to folks so they would know what was going on.
Well, that's very cool. Do you have any of the old copies of the Galvin?
Yeah, my mom bound them up as a Christmas present a few years ago, so I've got the whole collection of the Galvin Gazette, and they're just a hoot to go back and
I love that.
read what we thought was important at the ages of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's pretty fun. Cool.
And what's your mom's name?
Laura.
And your dad's name?
Barry, and they are alive and well. And I mentioned this there in my TED Talk at the end. I talk about how I try to call my parents, and I usually I'm going to voicemail, or if I get them, I can only talk a little bit because they're running out to do something in their adult community. They're volunteering in every organization that they possibly could. Yeah. And they're both in their 80s, mid to 80s, and they're vibrant. And I'm convinced that their service and their commitment to something beyond their aches and pains, which of course they have. I mean, if you're in your 80s and we're lucky enough to get to that point, there are physical ailments, but if you can get out of yourself and you can be of service,
yes,
wonderful things can happen psychologically. So they're just really happy, optimistic people because their life has a sense of purpose.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because that is a real gift to share with others, that, hey, you don't have to sit around and isolate yourself. Get out there and make an impact and give back, even if you're just maybe volunteering for a day. We were talking about that as we're trying to grow membership in Rotary and getting the spouses and the kids to come out and do projects. Like we had the Bixby Barbecue Blues event coming up here in Bixby, Oklahoma. But I love that you're sharing how that's helping to keep them vibrant. I was
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so much data now to back this up. Harvard's been doing this longitudinal study on aging. And what they have found is people who reach their late 80s and 90s who are healthy and vibrant and psychologically positive, it has nothing to do with how much money they made. And it's Harvard University. So they're tracking grads, and then they're tracking people in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and kind of comparing the two groups. It doesn't matter if they're looking at the Harvard grads or if they're looking at just average folks in Cambridge who they've been studying every year. They do these surveys. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's not money, wealth, power, fame that really dictates someone's happiness at those age brackets in the upper reaches. It's their social connections. And their social connections have a ton to do with not just the neighbor next door, but how they're serving the community. Yes. And that really is not the fountain of youth, because you're going to get old and we're all going to die, but it is a recipe for happiness and success in old age. And kind of gets back to the story you asked me at the beginning about the Department of Aging. So, this thing that I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to be working with, seniors. Now, here we are, towards the end of our conversation, talking about it again, because there's so many lessons that can be learned. But if you're of service, if you give back, it is the key to a long and happy life.
It just made me think of another book title for you, The Way to the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it is a trilogy. So I've been debating different things. There is going to be a third book, and it will have the word way in it. I'm just not sure what the other words are going to be. So we'll see. That'll be a couple of years away.
Well, we're coming to the end here, but I got a couple more questions, and I just love visiting with you. You're such a great spirit, Patrick. What were some of the nicknames you had growing up, if any, that you would like to share?
I tried a nickname on when I went to summer camp once. You could apply on your application, you could put in a nickname, and there was a baseball player named Rusty Staub, who I thought was just a cool baseball player. So I put down Rusty because my hair is kind of reddish brownish, and I got to camp and they started calling me Crusty and Dusty and Disgusty. And I realized, nicknames, maybe they're not for me. And ever since then, I've gone by Patrick. So I gave Rusty a shot and left it after a couple of weeks at summer camp.
I love it. It's so funny. When I was a little boy, my mom called me Dano. And so the other day we were going to a Christmas holiday party down there in Christmas party there in Sun Lakes, Arizona. And I thought, I'm just going to write that on there. And I made it phonetically correct. She spells it different, but I put Dayno. So everybody got a kick out of that. And we were having fun with that. Hey, real quick, what do you remember about your marriage proposal?
We were just reminiscing about this the other day because our 14-year-old was looking at my wife's ring and saying, did he really put that into a seashell? And when we were walking along the beach in Marin County, my aunt had helped me pick out this beautiful ring, and she had given me a shell. So I knew I was going to propose on the beach. So I had put the ring inside a shell, and I let her walk a little bit ahead of me. And then I put the shell down, and I didn't really get the right kind of shell to like pull it off because it was a very tropical shell in Northern California. So she knew something was up. Because I say, hey, sweetie, look, there's a shell on the beach. You should pick it up. And she turns around going, wow, that is weird. And she looked at me. I think she knew that it was some little game I had going, and she picked it up, and then the ring fell out. And it was a good memory, good laugh.
I love it. Well, I got to ask this last question because I know you got a great marriage going there, and so what do you think contributes most to a happy marriage in your thoughts as we closed out the video?
I think for me, it is an awareness that people are who they are, that you have to embrace the good. Everyone has good. If we look at our partner, and this is true beyond marriage, this is true, I think, for all relationships, honestly, we have to realize that we're not going to change people. That people have their good and their bad and they're frustrating and they're super uplifting. And if we focus on the negative, our relationship will go in the negative. But find the positive, embrace the positive, be positive, and things are going to work out.
I love that. Well, once again, Patrick, thank you so much. For those of you watching the video, get both books. Get The Trusted Way first, read that one, and then go get The Connector's Way, and then hopefully in the near future, you'll have those done for the third one that's going to be coming out, right, Patrick?
That's right. Yes, there's a third. It's a trilogy. So a couple of years out, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Patrick.
Excellent.